Oh hi! It all happened so fast, in a darkened room when I was in high school. Weirdly, that describes probably too many moments in my life. But what I'm talking about specifically is musical theater. And to get even more specific, I'm talking about the composer and lyricist Stephen Sondheim. I didn't know that I needed Stephen Sondheim in my life until I realized at 17 that it wasn't popular rock bands or bubblegum pop stars that got me through the day. It was his music. It was Into the Woods and A Little Night Music and Company and West Side Story and so many more. And so I've decided to take that love and create a podcast because, as we all know, more podcasts are what we currently need. It's called Putting It Together. It was supposed to have been released yesterday, but as I record this, both Apple and Google still haven't approved it. So fingers crossed it's happened. Putting It Together is a podcast where I discuss Stephen Sondheim's entire body of work chronologically, show by show, and song by song. Which means we will be starting with one of the most famous pieces of musical theater, West Side Story. And to be brutally honest with you, I created this show because of necessity. For the last few years, I kept going to iTunes and searching for a podcast that was devoted to the music and lyrics of Stephen Sondheim, and I was always disappointed. Nothing showed up when I searched, so basically, I finally decided to do it myself, and I'm just narcissistic enough to think that I can. Now, to the Broadway ignorant, it can be tough to explain exactly why Sondheim means so much to so many people. But it was a blood pact that I signed those many years ago, and if I'm to truly reach immortality, then it's my duty to convert as many as possible. Don't mind the pentagram. I mean, I get it. You might be wondering, why would I want to listen to this stuff? Isn't it just a bunch of fruity people singing? Which, yeah, it kind of is, but there's a lot of subtext going on, which I think we can all agree is the best kind of text. Why say what you actually mean when you can hide it underneath mounds of obtuse references and symbolism? For me, it's not only the fact that Sondheim is able to beautifully deconstruct language and provide deeper meanings to seemingly simple lyrics, it's that he also purposefully writes for the characters who are singing. One of the biggest criticisms I hear about musical theater is that people dislike actors just breaking out into song to describe what's going on. Not only that, but it can sometimes be done in a way that is too self-congratulatory in how witty the songwriter can be. Stephen Sondheim never liked that. He believed and believes, he is still alive, that the song and the character should be linked. If the character wouldn't use a word in regular speech, they shouldn't use it while singing, which is why he still cringes at having written Tony saying there will be no morning star in West Side Story. It's doubtful that a 1950s New York City gang member would use morning star when he'd just say the sun. But he was working with a bunch of collaborators and it was his very first show, so what can you do? For Sondheim fanatics, his biography is something that we all know, but in case you're not, here's a brief overview of the man until just before West Side Story opens on Broadway. Stephen Sondheim was born on March 22nd, 1930. His childhood was not exactly happy. His father left his mother when he was 9. His mother was emotionally manipulative and verbally abusive. This is the woman who once wrote to her son saying that her biggest regret in life was giving birth to him. Sondheim was in search of any type of real parental figure, and luckily, he struck up a friendship in his adolescence with James Hammerstein, who just so happened to be the son of Oscar Hammerstein. Hammerstein was the lyricist partner of Richard Rodgers, and that duo revolutionized musical theater with shows you have undoubtedly heard of, shows such as Carousel, Oklahoma, and The Sound of Music. The relationship between Sondheim and Hammerstein was very much like that of a father and son. Sondheim was already a fan of theater, but through Hammerstein's guidance became a devotee of how musical theater was produced. A great story is when Stephen Sondheim wrote an amateur show for his school and showed it to Hammerstein, pretending he didn't know who wrote it, and he hoped that his mentor would praise the talent of the unknown writer. However, Hammerstein responded by saying it was the worst thing he had ever seen. Yet he followed that up by saying, "But if you want to know why it's terrible, I'll tell you." They then spent hours going over every line in the musical. Sondheim is quoted as saying, "In that afternoon, I learned more about songwriting and the musical theater than most people learn in a lifetime." By the time Sondheim reached his early 20s, he wanted to strike out on his own, and he had enough of a rebellious spirit to believe that he could change musical theater in much the same way Rodgers and Hammerstein had done before him. He believed he would do that by composing his own music and lyrics for his very first show, and he tried doing so with Saturday Night, a musical that you probably have never heard of, and it, in fact, didn't work out. It would be produced decades later, and people still don't really talk about it. Through a chance meeting at a party with Arthur Lawrence, Sondheim was told about a new musical based on Romeo and Juliet, but set in modern-day New York. The music would be written by the brilliant Leonard Bernstein, who originally was going to write the lyrics, but had become too busy with other projects. The meeting with Bernstein went badly, according to Sondheim, but he was eventually offered the job, which I've always thought that there must have been something happening behind the scenes. Or, in classic Sondheim fashion, he's just very hard on himself. Listening to him in interviews, you'd be convinced he hates everything he's ever written. Sondheim initially was hesitant, but Hammerstein advised him to take the job because he could always write music later. And thus, a young, to be frank, inexperienced kid was brought on board to help out Leonard Bernstein to create the music for West Side Story, which was written by Arthur Lawrence, himself praised for his Broadway contributions, and directed by another towering figure, Jerome Robbins. It was quite a way to start. Now, before that darkened theater in high school, I was already a fan of musical theater. My music teacher in grade 5 had used Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat for a lesson, and something shifted in my brain. I went out and purchased just so many cast albums because I was super cool. I came of age in the 90s, so people were listening to Nirvana and other bands in the 90s, and I was loving this new world that I had discovered. It made me want to move to New York. I got obsessed with the history of theater, but most of all, I was just enthused by everything to do with musical theater. So, of course, I joined theater club in high school. This wasn't a group to perform plays, but a group that went and saw plays. What I saw that day when I was 17 was a production of Into the Woods, and I fell in love. Like I said, I'd love musical theater, but this was incredibly funny, but also heart-wrenchingly sad. The musical motifs would shift meaning as the show progressed, and more than anything, every song had a purpose and drove the story forward. Now, I don't want to make it sound like Sondheim is or was the only person to do this. I just happen to think he's the best at doing it. And for me, on that night, I understood what the power of great music and lyrics paired with the right character can do. Out of context, some of these songs can be out of key and not sung well, but with full knowledge, you can understand how they tie so intrinsically with the plot and the theme. This is why Howard Stern used Send in the Clowns, a song from A Little Night Music, as punishment on his radio show, but I happen to find it incredibly sad and moving. Listen, this is all to prove that I'm obsessed with the guy. The podcast that is hopefully available to you right now, called Putting It Together, is a show that goes chronologically through Stephen Sondheim's body of work, show by show, and song by song. This means that we're starting with West Side Story. The first episode, I invited on local theater director Joe Slabay to really delve into the history of the show and why it was so different than what you normally would have seen on stage in the 1950s. There are also 2 other episodes that I made available at the same time. Episode 2, I have my friend Nick Driscoll, who went to school for musical theater. He talks about Something's Coming. And then episode 3 has Christopher Duxbury, fellow YouTuber, but also dance teacher and choreographer. He discusses the dance at the gym. I'm super, super proud of this show. If you like Broadway, I think you'll dig it. And if you like Stephen Sondheim, I'm sure you'll love it. Do you have any musical memories, or maybe you also adore Stephen Sondheim? Let me know down in the comments below. I'll of course talk to you again next Thursday. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now.
Hi everybody, this is a Media Lab production.
Yeah. Okay.